Welcome. Every year, March has two holidays. International Women's Day on March 8th, and in Egypt, Mother's Day on March 21st. So, March is truly Women's Month. On this occasion, we wanted to dedicate an episode to the differences between men and women in terms of lifespan and health. It's often said that women live longer than men, even though men are generally less healthy and more prone to illness. There's a strange paradox here. Let's explore the reasons behind it in this episode after the break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Women do live longer than men. This fact was discovered through death records at the United Nations. The UN maintains birth and death records for more than 178 countries worldwide. This began in 1945-46 after World War II, when they started recording the births and deaths of more than 88 countries have records that are older than that, sometimes exceeding 150 or even 200 years, and in all. These records, whether those 38 countries or the 176 countries, they all find that the average lifespan of women is significantly longer than the average lifespan of men, even during times of disaster. For example, in some epidemics or diseases that affect certain countries, they find that women are also more resistant to these diseases and live longer. Even though lifespans generally decrease for men, women still have a slightly longer lifespan than men. And here we are now. In a period of disaster, we have a global pandemic. The coronavirus pandemic, and women are also generally more resistant to the coronavirus than men, and the death rate among men is higher than among women, so this is something that counts in favor of women. But the strange paradox is that although women live longer, they are more susceptible to illness. This has nothing to do with physical weakness. They are more prone to disease and infirmity, yet their mortality rates from these illnesses are lower. For example, in a country like the United States, the table look at here a 2013 statistic on the top. 15 causes of death in America shows who dies more often, men or women. We'll look at heart disease, for instance. They found that for every 3 men who die, there are only 2 women, meaning 1 more man dies. Cancer, for example, has 1 more than for deaths, meaning, roughly for every 3 men, there are 2 women. Accidents also have a higher death rate among men than women. There's also Parkinson's disease. And in all these cases, men are more than double the number of women, more than double the rate. And suicide rates, while not a disease in themselves, may be related to psychological factors. The suicide rate is 3.7 out of 10 higher in men than in women. That means for every 3.7 men who commit suicide, there is 1 woman. This suggests that men are more resistant to psychological stress and better able to cope with life's problems. Men tend to get overwhelmed and take their own lives more easily. Regarding diabetes and all other diseases, there is only one disease where men and women are equally affected: stroke. There is also one disease where men have a slight advantage over women: Alzheimer's. The number of men who develop Alzheimer's is slightly lower than the number of women. This indicates that women are more resistant to death from almost all diseases except Alzheimer's and stroke. However, women are more susceptible to these diseases and suffer more severe illnesses from them. It's a very strange paradox. What's the secret? How is it that women are more susceptible to all diseases then, yet they don't die from them as quickly? So, let's try to explain these things. Some people say that women worrying a lot and take better care of their health, going to the doctor quickly and getting checked out. Therefore, they maintain their health despite having these illnesses, because they take better care of themselves than men. Men, on the other hand, neglect visible issues. Their condition deteriorates and their health worsens, potentially leading to death. However, this explanation isn't convincing. Others say that joint inflammation, cartilage problems, and connective tissue issues are much more common in women than in men, and the pain is more intense. This leads to women's health being constantly poor. But what makes women, despite suffering so much and being more susceptible to diseases, die at a lower rate? So they looked for the reasons and found two main factors that you could say contribute to women's longer lifespan and men's shorter lifespan. They found that in Korea, and it seems that Korea has a certain culture. They have a history of castration for men. This castration procedure involves removing the testicles, thus depriving the male of the ability to produce testosterone, the male sex hormone. Their history shows that castration extends men's lifespan by 15 to 20 years compared to average men of the same social standing. Of course, I don't know why castration was so widespread in their history. Observed in some hospitals where men were treated for testicular diseases and had to undergo orchiectomy. Since men's lifespans increase by this amount, it seems testosterone is the hormone that affects lifespan. Testosterone, the male sex hormone, responsible for a man's strength and resistance and for muscle development and hair growth, is what affects his lifespan. They found that testosterone increases the rate of oxidation, which either increases or shortens a person's lifespan. In short, on the contrary, they found that estrogen, the hormone secreted by women's ovaries, is responsible for extending their lifespan and increasing their resistance to disease. This is because estrogen is an antioxidant and an immune system booster. We saw this in the case of COVID-19, where women were more resistant to the virus than men. They conducted a very simple experiment. They took mice and removed their ovaries, so they were deprived of testosterone. They then wanted to see if the levels of free radicals and oxidants in their bodies would increase or decrease. They found that after removing the ovaries, the oxidants increased significantly. These oxidants, of course, cell death and disease. So, they concluded that estrogen was reducing these harmful oxidants. Okay, so after we've done the procedure, let's give estrogen from an external source, like the birth control pills they give women. We'll add it to their food and see if it reduces the oxidative stress and free radicals. They found it reduces them significantly. That's great. This proves that estrogen plays a very effective role in extending women's lifespan. So, to summarize this episode, we found that women live longer and are more resistant to death from diseases, even though they are more susceptible to illness than men. The reason for shorter lifespans in men is testosterone, and the reason for longer lifespans in women is estrogen. Therefore, a man's strength lies in his weakness, and a woman's weakness lies in her strength. See you in the next episode. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.